Yes, and I was very lucky to be able to study with Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. If you people haven't read those books, it's really amazing. But he actually discovered a way to get over into the between life world without almost dying, which I was able to do, and it was amazing some of the things that people are talking about, psychic experiences and whatever, and you get those just from being there. And what I thought was interesting, I'm going to speak at the Boulder IANS group in October, and the email that I got from the organizer said somebody at the Scientific Exploration Society, what is that? Yeah, Society for Scientific Investigations, PhD, did a study, and he actually said learning about NDEs give people some of the benefits of actually being on the other side. So it's opening up that spiritual thing.
So the ways to do it without having a near-death experience, believe it or not, the indigenous cultures found out a long time ago that you could do San Pedro, which is an herb. There's ayahuasca. And I did go to Peru once, and I had a shaman, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to, because I mean, obviously, I've only had that experience when I was having a near-death experience, and I would like to go visit the other side. So I go and I take the ayahuasca, or I think, no, in our case, it was San Pedro, which is a cactus. And everybody ingests the San Pedro, and within a few minutes, the other people in the room are just like, wow, I'm talking to my dead relative. And I'm kind of like, my grandparents are kind of closer than they usually are, but I mean, this is no different than what I experience every day. And finally, the shaman looked at me and he goes, sister. He's like, you live in the other side. He said, I'm taking these other people to this place. And he goes, if you live here and work here every day, then of course you're not going to have any amazing experience. And I was like, oh. So, yeah. So, but there are ways, and actually what's available, what Susan and I have experienced and what our increased intuition, that is available to everybody if you choose to develop it. It's those of us who have been clinically dead that get to cheat and get there much faster, you see, because anybody can do what we're doing, and I don't want to act like we're so specific or chosen, but many of us, including Susan, feel like we are compelled to tell our story. Karmic debt, thank you. All right, this is a sad story. It took me years to even finally get, to where I could tell this. Even today, even in today's world, when people show the ability that I've shown, there can be such a thing as a witch hunt. When I was the city nurse for the city of Colorado Springs, my most immediate supervisor was a sweet little lady who happened to be Irish Catholic. She did not believe in intuitives. She did not believe in psychic ability. And when police or firefighters went to the front desk and said, she knew stuff about me, she could never figure out how that worked. And one time I took a leave of absence, trying to decide if I wanted to leave nursing and do the work I'm doing now, or if I really just kind of wanted to keep this as my hobby and stay in nursing, because I did love nursing. And so she had this theory that I must have breached the medical database in Colorado Springs. And so she said, you know what she's doing? She's checking out the medical database, then she's enticing these people to come in here to the clinic or to have a reading, and then she's telling them about their pap smear result from January of 2012. And it was like, she could have talked to me about it, but she didn't. Instead, she took it to our supervisor above her, and they decided to call a press conference. The first I heard about the situation, the Gazette-Telegraph, that's the paper in Colorado Springs where I live, they called me and they said, what is your response to the allegations from the city of Colorado Springs about our city occupational health nurse? And I was like, well, what are they saying? She said, they state that you've breached a database, 2,500 people that you are not allowed to look at. And I was like, nuh-uh, never. Now, since HIPAA came into play, the Health Information Privacy Protection Act came in 15 years into my 30-year career. When that first happened, of course, we were all good about not looking anybody up anymore, but over time we softened up, and if a relative said, in such case like my dad, he had a sleep study, and his doctor already told him all about it, but he said, I just want a copy for my home records. Fine, printed that up. I was dating a man at the time who had a really high cholesterol. When he had his cholesterol drawn, he called and told me what it was, and I said, well, what was it last year? He goes, I don't remember. I said, can I look it up? He said, sure, so I looked that up. So there were times where, yes, I broke Health Information Privacy Protection Act, not in any way to be harming anybody. Usually it was at the patient's request. Well, unfortunately, I became the poster child for nurses who breach databases, and now they have actually changed that system throughout most of the 50 states to where a nurse cannot get into that database and look at anybody besides who her doctor ordered that for. So obviously one day I'm on my knees and I looked up to God and I said, you know what? I work for you, and now I'm being called out. My reputation is shot. People think that I've actually breached these databases, which I have not done. And of course, a 2-year police investigation showed that I had not done what they had claimed I did. But one day I fell to my knees and I was really kind of suicidal, and I said, and I knew that we weren't allowed to commit suicide, but I thought, this isn't fair. I work for you, and now I've been called on the carpet and I'm just done. And my own guidance came to me and said, I'm going to take you and I'm going to show you something from the lifetime just before the one that you're in now. In that lifetime, my name was Karen Ann Logan. I lived in New York City. I didn't look at all like I look today. And she had relatives on 2 sides of her family. Her dad was a Jewish man, and her mom was Roman Catholic. The Roman Catholic side of my family, the uncles were in the mafia. On the Jewish side, those uncles were actually in the legal system. And that one uncle that was a district attorney was going to try to become a judge. And the uncles in the mafia said, it was one thing when he made district attorney. We do not want him getting a judgeship when he knows what he knows about us. So they had a plan. They're like, Karen, you're going to go ahead and tell everybody that this district attorney sexually abused you when you were a child. And that'll ruin his career, and then he won't go anywhere. And she did it. She accused an uncle of sexually abusing her who had never touched her, and she created a situation where he was publicly held up for ridicule. He lost his career. That's your eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of karmic type situation. But what we started in December of 2012, we became where we're starting to go out of what I call that karmic cycle, and we're starting to realize that it just leads to this, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing means that we're always in this constant cycle of either paybacks or pay forward. And so now, even though this happened to me and somebody accused me of a crime that I was not guilty of, when I die in this lifetime, I'm not going to say, go back and get my boss. I'm just going to say I learned from it. It put me on the path that I was supposed to be on because I was resisting leaving nursing. And the light itself said, we asked you for 5 years to leave nursing, you did not leave nursing, and we put you on path. So in the work that I do now, I try to explain to people when that inner voice in your chest, your gut, whatever you want to call it, your heart, when it tells you what you need to do, and it's repeatedly telling you something that you ignore, do that at your very own great peril, because God will put us back on path if we refuse to stay on path ourselves. So I get it now, and I have recovered from that because I actually make more per hour now than I made as a nurse, but I still don't work as many hours as I did, in nursing. But any other questions? So does that help about the karmic thing? But luckily we are walking out of that since December of 2012, so it won't be so much of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth in the future. Anybody else? Yep.
Hi, I want to tell you that while you were talking, I could see a being above you, kind of in a white, and the being was like, and then at the end you started talking about the right hand and the left hand. So it was all there visible while you were speaking.
That is my higher self. And for all of us, they watch over us. But the fact that you could visualize her shows your gifts. Because for me, I'm only clairaudient, meaning I hear it in my head. And once in a while, I'll see something in the third eye. Like I'll see you sitting here, and if I look in my third eye, I can see your guidance too. But the way you could see it, like you're sort of like you saw it in the physical room, right? See, that's a gift. So that's amazing. It is it? Really? Yeah. Well, you know what? Again, we're in a time since December of 2012 where we started shifting, and more people like us are coming out of the woodwork. And I know that you, ma'am, help people on a regular basis doing your work in your own place and space. I bet you do, right? Yeah. And I don't want to hog this. I want to make sure that you guys know that Susan is obviously also a great person to ask questions. But anybody else? Questions? Did you get my message? You and I were trying to hook up after the last near-death experience talk. I'm still interested in that because I just recognized you here. So We were trying to connect and we never did, so I hope we will. What's your question?
Experiences with a master guide or guides, or is it just your higher self?
You know what? Oh, yes, thank you. She asked me, do you have any experience with a master guide or just guides? Exactly. Yes. My experience and my work, and I've done this again for almost 25 years that I started, putting it out there that I do this. Usually, our guides are going to be one of two things. Most often, it's our soul, and our soul can come in as anybody from our past lives or even our future lives. So many times when people come to me and say, hey, my guide is so-and-so and this is what they told me, I look at them and I grin and I'm like, do you have any idea who that guide is? And sometimes they're like, well, it's my dead father. Okay, if you have a dead relative who loves you, they're going to stay on your side and they can be in more than one place at a time the whole time that they're in the in-between. But when they come back, they're usually going to come back into your family. And so then, that's why sometimes people say, I had a relative cross over, and for 5 years they were right there. I could connect with them. And then one day, they were just gone. And then I'll say to them, who was born in your family that year that that person suddenly disappeared? And often it's like, well, my grandchild. When you look in those grandchild's eyes, which is the window to the souls, do you see anybody that looks a little familiar? And how many times that really resonates with people. They're just like, oh my gosh, this grandchild is just like that relative that crossed over, in so many ways. And because we have traits that are either soul deep or skin deep. Our skin deep traits are going to be for that physical lifetime. But our soul deep traits, such as resisting the physical, will happen in every lifetime. And so I'm still there, even though I am a very blessed person with 2 sons. My sons are 31 and 25, and my grandson is 5 years old, and my granddaughter is 9 months old. So I have some anchors to keep me here. But any other questions?
Do you think your near-death experiences in the aftermath were pre-planned by you before you incarnated in this lifetime? And if so, what connection with past lives, if any? Your past lives?
I think that every single one of our souls have planned our continuum of lifetimes a long time ago. So that's sometimes, I lost a nephew on April 8th, and he was only 25 years old, and it was difficult to lose him, and yet I also knew from when he was a very young child that he has another lifetime that he's going to get into in about 4 years. So I knew that it was already planned. It was so frustrating. But in my case, I know for a fact that my lifetimes have been planned by my soul eons ago, is the best way to put it. And in fact, because of the work I do and that I'm over on the other side a lot, my 5-year-old grandson is actually the same soul that used to be my spouse. We have a child together, and that's my younger son. So not only do I know about my past lives, but I also know that when I'm through with this lifetime, I will be my grandson's child. Now, I can't say whether I'm going to be a boy or a girl, because what happens is a soul chooses their next vehicle by choosing the people that they're going to come back to. And generally, you're going to know one of those parents and not both of them. But once you choose that, then you just wait for the pregnancy to occur. But once that pregnancy occurs, it's actually up to the light or biology, however you want to look at it, and then that baby develops. The reason I know this is so many souls have been on the other side. Like an example, my former spouse, his name was Jim. As soon as he crossed over, he told me, he said, I'm going to come back and be your granddaughter. So I was so sure. When Ryan said he got his little girlfriend pregnant, I'm like, she's coming! And I got her a little Bronco outfit, a little cheerleader outfit. And then the kids came by the nurse's clinic that I was working at the time, and they said, guess what? Your granddaughter has a penis on the ultrasound. And I was like, what? Because it was so fun for the psychic to be wrong when it's a 50-50 chance. But he wanted to be a girl. So fast forward, I have this grandson who's 5 years old. We're standing in Walmart when he's 2 years old, and he's like, grandmother, I want the pink bike helmet. And I said, no, I'm just not secure enough in your masculinity to buy you the pink bike helmet. I'm like, can I get you the black one, or can we pick one of these others? And a lady heard me, and she's just like, what did you say to that 2-year-old? And I said, some souls, and I think we've all heard about this recently with the gay marriage and things like that, some souls, they come in, they really have their heart set on being one or the other. And then their biology takes over and takes care. So this grandson once in a while has told me that he really did want to grow up and be the mother one day. And I said, you know, no matter what, I'm going to love this kid. I will be this kid's kid. I don't know whether I'm going to have two dads or a mom and a dad, but the bottom line is that I think that we need to try to embrace whatever it is that we became, but for those who can't, I think they have a right to do whatever they want to do about that. So I'm definitely a live and let live, you know, kind of person. And of course, there's a lot of religions that say that's not right. And that's why we've got this big division over gay marriage and this and that. When I was in my near-death experience when I was 7, I actually asked God about that. And God said, you know what I want? I want integrity in relationships. And he said, you know, and this was actually St. Francis was speaking to me, but God and that light was right behind him. So I knew that that light was listening and would correct if anything was said wrong. And so even such a thing as people who are into this thing called swinging or whatever, as long as everybody knows what's happening and that that's okay, that's supposedly integrity in relationships. The problem is you can make a deal, say 2 couples, and say, hey, this is just gonna be for fun, and invariably one's gonna fall in love with the other one's spouse. And so it leads to things that I think are very difficult. So I personally don't recommend that, but God's not gonna put you in the fiery pits of hell over that. So did I answer your question though about how the soul? Yeah, it probably is, but to answer your question briefly, yes. I do know that my soul and your souls planned your life continuum a long time ago. Oh, my souls did plan those, absolutely. My near-death experiences were planned because they made me who I am today. Absolutely, thanks.
And Bill, to piggyback on that question, Nancy Rhines addressed that same question. During her near-death experience, she was shown several points along her lifetime that she agreed to that would trigger her true destiny and life path, and she'd ignored them. One of the triggers was when her father had died, and he appeared at the foot of her bed a couple days later after his death, and they had a conversation, and that was her chance to begin really her true destiny of educating others along the spiritual path, and the fact that the veil between our physical and the spiritual is very thin, and we have access to it. And she ignored all of these triggers, but she had a fail-safe trigger, and that was to get killed. And that's what she was told by her guide or her angel, that was the fail-safe, because she had signed the contract for this lifetime to be a teacher of the spiritual path. And she's on it now, kicking and screaming, but she's on it now. Okay. Any other questions for Susan or Lori? Let me get this lady over here.
I don't know, in your experience, I just had my death experience 4 years ago, and many things are happening, like my CD goes on every day at the same time all by itself. Every single day now for 14 days, and it plays either past lives, plays the CD, and today it shot it out to me as if now I'm done with that. And the other one is Sarah Brightman. But in this few months, one thing that happened to me that's really got my attention was a person of another country whom I had known showed up after an event, and we had a few words as he was going to get in his car, and all of a sudden when he said something to me, I heard my clairaudience said something else, and I saw on his face eyes and eyes and eyes and eyes and eyes and eyes. And when I talked to the Edgar Casey group in not Colorado Springs, in Scottsdale, they weren't sure if it was past lives I was seeing, or if I wondered if it was multiple personalities, but I've never forgotten it about this person who's very brilliant. And have you ever had this experience?
Thank you. Anyone? Gloria?
So you're saying you saw someone with eyes? Do you keep doing? Does it keep happening, or just one time? See, for me, it's the faces, and it's random. They will come. Never at a stressful time in my life or anything. It's always when I'm calm, And it doesn't mean I don't have problems going on or something, but for some reason, I'll see faces, and they'll come at random times, always smiling. So I'm wondering if it's sort of the same thing. Uh-huh. Right. Right. And you weren't scared or anything, right? It was just unusual. Yeah, it's information. Yeah, no, it's, yeah. Yeah. That's sort of like with me and the faces that come. And sometimes it's one right after the other, and I'll get 10 or 20 people and it'll stop. And then I have no idea why. And I think it's information. I don't know.
Yeah. I think what you were seeing was the windows of all of his different past lives. In other words, for some reason you were seeing eyes from his previous or his future lifetimes. Multiple personality is just another way of most of the time people who are diagnosed with multiple personality, besides maybe that one case called Sybil that they did the movie about, but most of us that have been diagnosed with multiple personality are really just people who channel somebody else, you know what I mean? And so there are many times, and that's why it's hard to love somebody like us, is that John never knows when I'm coming from my Lori perspective, or if I've kind of jumped into a channeling mode, and then all of a sudden I'm saying something that is absolutely not Lori's opinion. And that makes people just feel like I'm all over the map, and so that multiple personality thing is usually somebody who's a good channel. So I think what your guidance was showing you was that this guy was multifaceted, and that he had a lot of information for you. They were definitely wanting you to pay attention to this man, but I don't think they were calling him crazy. So.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. Sure.
Or relate to anything about pets.
No, but I heard from somebody else that they did, their pets were waiting for them. And then there is this one movie, and I don't recall it, but it was about someone who died. And she said there were stairs for her. When she got through the light, there were stairs. And on these stairs were her past pets waiting on the stairs. Yeah. So because that was a question I had too, was about pets. Because there's some that I miss immensely. So, yeah.
I think pets, just like people, do reincarnate. And my dad had a Australian Shepherd recently that I think died in December. And he went ahead and got another puppy that was born in, I think, January. Yeah, on his birthday. But the bottom line is that, my dad does not believe in reincarnation, but he said, man, if I did, I would swear that this puppy has the same exact soul as the one that I just lost, because every unique thing that other dog did, this one does. And so yes, your animals that you've lost, first of all, when we cross over and we go through that tunnel, the first thing we see is we're greeted by everything or everyone that we ever loved and that ever loved us, because it's not always the same. But your pets also reincarnate. So sometimes I'm doing a reading and they're like, you just told me that when I die, I'll cross over and I'll see my dead mom, but then you told me that my dead mom became my grandkid. How can she greet me if she's back down here being my grandkid? Good question. Because the higher self of that grandkid is going to be up there in the guise of your mom at the day you cross over. And really, she greeted you in her own transition because there's no time up there. So my nephew who died on April 8th has already seen my death, my parents' death, his father, my brother, etc., etc. So let's get this, ladies.
Have you seen or are you aware of other lives off the planet, somewhere else in the universe?
I am aware that there are other physical worlds without any question, and my own guidance does block any, quote, alien lifetimes that I've had. When I'm on this planet, I can only access my previous lifetimes on the Earth plane, but there is more than one physical world to incarnate within, so that is a great question. But I personally don't have alien, information, but a lot of the people that I talk with and that are like me, they do. It was my own soul's choice to block me from that so that I could maybe mainstream a little better. Because since I've been talking about this since the 1970s, this is much more accepted now. And so they were trying to protect me when they came in with that rule, so.
And there was another lady, because I've talked to a lot of people too, that when she had her near-death experience, she was in a car accident. She was met by what she called beings that were very tall, and they had a liquid metal kind of body. And it wasn't, it was 2 arms, 2 legs, and all that. But they had their robes, but they were, all I can remember her saying was liquid metal was how she could describe, and she said, it's nothing we've ever seen here. It's a different, something like that, I guess. And there was a bunch of them around her, and those were who met her. And she said there was candles and stuff, but nobody spoke, but yet they were communicating, like I did with Gabe, even though we were very far away and I had no mouth, but we were communicating. And she said that these beings were communicating with her. And she said with the beings, some of them were good and a couple of them weren't so good. Not that they were evil, but they, it was like a game. We were like a game to them. We were experiments. She said we were, they were all watching us. We are watched all the time, each and every one of us. But they knew she was coming. They knew she was going to have a car accident. And so when they met her, they explained that they knew that the car accident was coming because it was like kind of planned. It was just kind of sad, but it was. And she didn't die. That part I don't know if she was supposed to die or not. But she came back, and her description of these spirit beings or whatever were completely different. Nothing I'd ever heard before, but it was very real for her. And she said, no, this is who met me. And they knew my name. They knew everything about me. And she was up there for a while. I think she was in a coma, as I recall. But for me, I didn't realize that could happen. I didn't realize until she told me her story that it can go so many dimensions, so many different places. And the other thing I'd wanted to say too before that I had forgotten was I was also told when I was up there that, and like Lori said, there's no time. When you get up there, it felt, I was up there, I have no idea because I was out and bleeding to death for a long time. And when I was up there, it felt like eternity, but it wasn't because there's no time. It just doesn't exist there. It's just completely different. But also, I was told, after he says, not your time, you gotta go back, you gotta go raise your kids, all that, and no cheating, he also said, when I come back, when it's your turn to come back, that's when we'll have your life review. It's gonna happen to everybody. So there is not like a judgment per se, like they perceive in the movies and a bad, good thing or anything like that. And what I was told from a lady who actually did have her life review, she was dead completely. I believe she drowned and was dead for 15 minutes, so she had her life review. But what hers was, which creeped me out to this day, I live life differently because of her information, but it's like a punishment, I don't know, or learning. But let's say you hurt someone, whether on purpose or an accident, whatever, and they're going through a book of you. And what you did to that person, you get to feel what they felt like. And this lady told me that, and I was like, oh my God. And in my head, I'm going through every stupid thing I've done in my life and going, I'm gonna pay for that, I'm gonna pay for that, I'm gonna pay for that. So just so that everybody knows everything you do, even though you don't think people know, they know. And that's what the life review is, this judgment thing. But just so you know, there's a life review for all of us.
That's so you got that going. Yeah. Life reviews. First of all, when you get up there, the good news is that that all-knowing being that's actually doing the judging is your soul. Now, the light is there, but the light again is just the combination of every soul's light together. So they're just being a loving presence while your own soul is going over this. But when people are in a life review, they think that this soul that is their own is like a person outside of them. But just exactly like Susan said, when you go through your life review, it's hard to believe that you can go through every moment of your life and re-experience everything that anybody ever felt from having an experience with you. So, when I was being rough on my kids when they were little and I was screaming at the top of my lungs and it made them feel bad, I'm going to get to feel what that was like. But also when I was a nurse and I did things to make somebody feel better after surgery and stuff, I'm going to get to feel that too. But you do, you get to feel exactly what you went through, and that's when you start figuring out how you're going to balance some things out. Like when I was in my life review between Karen and the lifetime of Lori that I'm in now, that's when my soul said, you know, we're going to have to do something to balance out what you did to that uncle, because you died before you were able to balance that out. Because she died in a car accident on the 59th Street Bridge in New York. So, so the life review is not something to be afraid of. It's always a beautiful thing. Even JJ was sitting there going, oh no, and it's like, no, I mean, it's hard to see where you were hard on somebody, but it's really beautiful to see where you were good. And I think most of us are more good than bad. So that's why the life review shouldn't be too stressful for most people.